fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Is there really a higher power? Is there a God? Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again, Salt Strong Unchurched. Yes, thank you, I'm feeling better, COVID is over, allergies are over, I'm back to normal, feeling great. I've received an email this past week from a young person who had watched my video on anxiety. I've suffered from anxiety attacks for well over a decade, and I published a video back in 2019 that now has like 60 or so thousand views. And I believe I talked about this on a prior podcast, that with all of the angst out there and all of the chaos and the hate and hatred and the stuff that you were seeing on social media and the confusion and the division, all of this has taken the average person's anxiety up to a whole new level. And I know that because I'm getting emails literally every day now. I get at least one email from someone who saw that video. They're feeling hopeless. They're going to YouTube to try to find solutions to overcoming anxiety. And they're finding my video, which is one of the top ones on YouTube. And this gentleman sent me a message, and first he said, thank you. And he says, hey, I got a couple questions I'm really struggling with after watching your video. And I said, yeah, let me know what it is. I waited, and I heard back from him. And he says, he goes, I get the breathing part. Breathing was a big part of what I talk about. And there's this very specific way to breathe to get rid of anxiety. And really to conquer it. And so that's one. And then there's the whole mission and kind of finding purpose in life, which I'm going to talk about on the next episode, by the way. And then the last part is faith. And that's faith in God. That's also faith in yourself that you can overcome it. I mean, so much of it is in your head, right? I mean, the anxiety attacks in general, a panic attack is, for the most part, your head's causing it, and it's causing your body to believe that there's something going on that you need to run away from. It's this whole fight or flight. And I live with it. And I knew it was in my head. And a big part of it for me and for countless others who've watched the video and said, they've been overcome it is that faith part. And it's also the toughest part because we can't see God, right? It's not like a book or a pill or whatever it is that you can see it and feel it and touch it and it's got physical presence. We can't see God. And many of us have maybe been burned by a church, or we've had something bad happen in our life. And in this young man's case, he lost his dad just about a year ago. And that's gut-wrenching, right? For a young person to lose their father figure, in this case, he said, it was his best friend. It was his person he looked up to, his mentor, is kind of his guiding light. And all of a sudden, it's taken away from him abruptly. And I don't think, from just based on what I'm hearing, that this person, had much God in their life. And so now, he's sitting there blaming God. Well, if God's great, if God is good, why did he take my dad? And he says, I'm really struggling with the fact, is there a higher power? If there really is a God, why did he take my dad? Why are these bad things? And I struggled replying back. I did. And I did the best I absolutely could, and even gave him a couple, videos that I wanted him to watch that were really, really powerful. But nothing put it together like this book. It's crazy how God puts all the right things right in your path, right when you need it. Maybe even this podcast for you is coming into your path right when you need it. And I picked up this book. I'd had it a while ago, and I never got into it. But it happened to be sitting there on the top of my desk. I think like my wife or someone accidentally moved it, and it's sitting there right in front of my face. And it says, Christianity for People Who Aren't Christians, Uncommon Answers to Common Questions by James Emery White, a gentleman I had on the podcast, on this Unchurched podcast a year or so ago. So Christianity for People Who Aren't Christians. And I started reading it. In the midst of all this is happening. And as soon as I read it, I got goosebumps. Like, all right, I got to share this with Unchurched. This is so good. And the very first chapter is talking about the God who is there or not. And it's kind of pokes fun. It says that, the first, or I guess it was the second Soviet to fire off into space and orbit the Earth. It's just a Russian cosmonaut. And when he returned, he said, I looked around for God, this God that everyone's talking about, and I couldn't see him, right? And of course, society today kind of pokes fun of that, right? For the people that don't believe, and the atheists want us, oh yeah, there it is. There's more proof it doesn't exist. But the book starts saying, all right, let's go into that. Let's talk about, does a higher power even exist? And we talk about what I mentioned earlier. You know, we even with science, right? We want to be able to prove something exists by a physical presence, by something we can touch and feel and measure. But obviously, you can't put God into a test tube for an examination, right? You cannot prove that God exists by normal scientific methods, right? But just because you can't repeat something or study it or put it in a test tube doesn't mean it's not real. No one's ever seen love, but we know it's real. No one has ever smelled freedom, but we know it exists. And this is right from the book. And as soon as I read that, I was like, wow, right? I mean, no one is actually seen or felt the feeling of hopelessness or anxiety, but we know it exists, right? And that's powerful. And of course, by God's, by any definition, it would be hard to measure him, but we kind of know something's there. And I personally have felt that presence. For me, it happened when I was dealing with cancer, and I've told that story before. And and that doctor asked if he could pray over me in the middle of the hospital, and I felt like this wild energy going through my body. It was the first time I'd ever felt that in my entire life. And then there's this peace and this understanding that there is a God, and he was watching over me. He was like, the Holy Spirit was like in me. It was absolutely nuts. It's something I can't recreate over and over again, unfortunately. And it's tough to explain that to someone who's really struggling with it. But I really love that first analogy. And you know, a lot of people, including, you know, some people that I'm friends with, right? Believe in the Big Bang Theory and just feel, oh yeah, this whole, God thing's kind of silly. And they go heavily into that, right? Because here's the thing about the Big Bang Theory. I'm just going to read, from the book. It is known that something cannot come from nothing. We know that the universe is not internal, yet, according to the Big Bang Theory, something did come from nothing, right? So we know nothing can come from nothing. Even scientists all believe that. Atheists believe that. But yet, according to the Big Bang Theory, something did come from nothing. So the problem is that you can't just say everything began with the Big Bang and act as if somehow you've explained the origins of the universe, because that still doesn't explain where the matter that exploded came from. In layman's terms, where did all the stuff that got banged come from, and who banged it? Something or someone somehow brought that first matter miraculously into existence in such a way that it exploded into the universe. This something had to exist outside of space and time, because space and time didn't exist before the Big Bang. So anyone in the scientific community would agree that this could not have happened according to the current laws of physics, which means we're talking about something outside of the laws of physics, something outside of our natural phenomena. And there's a category for this. It's called supernatural. And that kind of puts us in the God territory now, doesn't it? It's really fascinating. It goes on this whole chapter. I'm not going to read it word for word. But now it's almost like he's reversing it, saying this astronomical evidence leads us to more of a biblical view of the origin of the world. And then it even goes back, all right, well, it begs the question, who made God, right? Where did God come from? And if you think about this whole Big Bang Theory, and all of a sudden there was just this random event that somehow came from nothing and created an earth that is literally precisely perfect for us humans to live in. They talk about if we were just even a couple degrees off in terms of our axis and the way we're spinning and how close we are to the sun, we would be burned to death or frozen to death. I mean, the whole thing, it's literally perfectly designed. Perfectly designed for us humans to be here on this earth. And it's really fascinating when you think about that. And I'm going to keep going here. It says, so even if you could come up with a theory, this is from Alan Guth, by the way, which is a leading physicist at MIT. It says, even if you could come up with a theory that would account for the creation of something from nothing through the laws of physics, you'd still have to account for the origin of the laws of physics. Astrophysicists will tell you that what should have happened with the Big Bang was the creation of equal parts matter and antimatter. So I'm going to read that again. And any astrophysicist will tell you that what should have happened, just based on science, is that with the Big Bang theory, it would have created equal parts of matter and antimatter. But that wasn't what happened. Particles of matter barely outnumbered particles of antimatter by a rate of about 1,000,000,001 to 1,000,000,000. Isn't that wild? So the universe as we know it should not have come out of the Big Bang, but it did somehow. Something somehow stepped in to counter all we know about science and created an imbalance in favor of matter. No one knows how or why. It's almost as if there was an intervention. Wow. So cool when you think about that. And, I mean, this book, I haven't read the whole thing. I'm really just in the first chapter here, and I was like, I got to get on the podcast and share this. So I will continue to keep doing updates on this. But there's so much order in this world and just in humans that, I mean, it appears to be pretty intricately designed, wouldn't you say? Which also kind of implies a designer, right? I mean, think about that. How could all of this happen without some type of designer? And I love this analogy they give here. So can you imagine if you came up to an F-12? We're talking about the F-12 Raptor from Lockheed Martin, one of the top fighter jets in the entire world. It is superior to almost everything out there. It is the most stealthy. It's invisible to radar. We're talking about that F-12 Raptor, right? So something that was designed, it had designers, cost $1 billion. So imagine you came upon an F-22 in the middle of the desert. You could reason that it came together there by chance and that the metal was just flung together by way of some chaotic sandstorm, basically the Big Bang, and that the instruments and the panels and the wings and this advanced technology were all brought together by some freak accident of nature, a Big Bang, if you will. But we would also agree, knowing what we know, that that's highly unlikely that would ever be your first thought. If you came upon an F-22 in the desert, in the middle of the desert, your initial thought was that somehow someone landed it there or designed it to be there, right? There is staggering design in order to the universe. I mean, staggering design in complete order to the universe. So much design and order that it seems way too much for just mere chance, about the same chance of an F-22 just somehow showing up in the middle of the desert by some crazy chaotic sandstorm. And so staggering that it compels many people to consider some great designer of the universe. But it goes deeper than that, right? The anthropodic principle from the Greek word anthropos means that man or human is the idea that our world is uniquely suited to human beings and carbon-based life, the only form of life known to science. But that's putting it mildly. It's freakishly suited for human life, as I talked about earlier. There are so many dynamics that if changed only slightly would make it literally impossible for us to exist. You can't help but marvel how all of them came together in one planet, in one solar system, in one galaxy, in one universe. And here's the number I was talking about earlier, I alluded to. If you increased Earth's orbital speed by no more than just 1.4 times its current speed, we would achieve escape of velocity, and we would literally fly right out of the solar system if we just move 1.4 times faster. And then consider Jupiter, right? The planet Jupiter with this massive gravitational field that is redirecting almost all of the main comets that would literally wreak havoc on our solar system, specifically here on Earth. It's almost like a mighty shield has been strategically positioned in just the right place to protect our planet where all of the humans are. It's wild, right? And think about just our oxygen-rich atmosphere that allows life in general, right? Nothing else has it like this. And just even a slight change, this whole thing would fall apart. I mean, and that's what's so crazy, right? And so many people just dismiss an idea of a higher power or a God and think, oh yeah, we're all just here by random. No. I mean, and this book just does such an amazing way of spelling this out and really refuting any possible belief that someone could just say, yeah, this is just all here by random, that we all just kind of showed up and it all happened. And he talks about evolution next week and started mentioning that. And I'm going to probably do a whole nother podcast on that. But I wanted to start with this one because it's so powerful. And I'll end with this quote from Stephen Hawking. I think most people probably know who that is. And Stephen said, it would be very difficult to explain why the universe should have begun in just this way, except as the act of a God who intended to create beings like us. Wow, Stephen Hawking, I want to read it again. It would be very difficult to explain why the universe should have begun in just this way, except as the act of a God who intended to create beings like us. Powerful stuff. I hope this is helpful. I'm going to continue on this. Once again, the book is called Christianity for People Who Aren't Christians by James Emery White. A really amazing book so far, and I'm only on page 30 here, and this really is first chapter, just kind of refuting this. But it is uncommon answers to common questions that we all have. Is God real? How do we know? Why are we here? Is there a purpose for us? And I'm going to be tackling that one next, because that was probably the next issue this young man had. Is at first I can't believe in God, and if you can't believe in God, I wasn't put here on a purpose, right? And how am I supposed to believe in all that? And I mean, that is a cause of a lot of anxiety, right? If all of a sudden we don't believe that we weren't here for a purpose, and if we don't believe in a God, there's no higher power, and it was just all kind of chaos, and our life doesn't really matter, then yeah, I can absolutely see why that would cause a ton of anxiety in life. So I'll continue on with this one. I'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts or questions or other references that explain this well. I hopefully I didn't butcher it too bad. I'm trying to kind of share my thoughts and read parts of this book, but I got so excited when I read it because it was literally the answer that I wanted to give to these young men, and now I can kind of go back and point them to some real kind of hard evidence, if you want, and really just some hard analogies. I mean, I love that F-22 analogy. Right. And that's what so many of us do with our own lives and just kind of dismiss that, oh, yeah, our perfectly designed bodies on this perfectly designed earth, we're just kind of by random. It just doesn't make sense when you think about it. So, guys, love you. Hope all is well. Shoot me an email, joe@saltstrong.com, joe@saltstrong.com, and I will talk to you on the next episode.
'Cause fishing, it's